This was one of the most heart-wrenching chapters of Black Clover I've ever read, and I mean that in a good way, because the fact that this chapter has me genuinely fearing for the lives of these characters shows just how immersed in this content I was. In all three of my readings of this chapter, I was filled with complete and utter dread as we watched alongside Nero as each member of the Bulls were brutally and helplessly taken out one at a time by this paladin. And the sad thing is, we all knew this was going to happen. After watching how easily Domnatio broke them down in the last chapter, we knew going into this one that there was no hope in the Black Bulls winning this fight. No, the best thing that we could hope for was them surviving long enough for the Door of Destiny to finish and Asta to make his grand return. And while that essentially is what happens in this chapter, Asta does finally make it back to his friends. It came at the severely high cost of all but one of his friends being left on the very verge of death. And making that one friend who's left standing be Nero was such a gut-punchingly smart decision by Tabata because she's already experienced this exact same scenario. Back over 500 years ago, the only friend Nero had was the first Wizard King, Lumiere. Sure, she technically worked for him, but Lumiere made sure to establish early on that he saw her as a friend and equal and not a servant. And though it took a while for her to accept that kind of relationship between the two of them, Nero did eventually open her closed heart off to him, allowing her to see him as her closest friend, only to tragically lose him shortly afterwards. And once she lost her best and only friend, Nero once again locked her heart away by choosing to stay in her bird form for over 500 years, until her mission of reviving him became successful. But then she met Asta, and though she intended to just use him for her mission, after spending so much time watching over him, she began to care for him just as much as she did Lumiere. And after finally managing to revive Lumiere for a short period of time, and him with his last moments encouraging her to stop sealing away her heart and find friends in this new era, she finally once again opened her heart to the rest of the Black Bulls. It took over 500 years for Nero to finally overcome that trauma, only for the exact same thing to happen all over again. All of her new friends are dying all around her, and once again, she is powerless to stop it from happening. Reading this chapter through her point of view really made watching this fight all the more difficult because it was already sad enough watching these characters we've grown to love be so brutally destroyed in this chapter, but adding on the context I mentioned through her inner monologue just made it even harder and sadder. And I couldn't help but relate to Nero as she was the only one left standing in the way of the paladin as she desperately called for Asta to save them, because in my head I was doing basically the exact same thing, hoping that he would manage to come through the portal just in time to save her from suffering the same fate as the rest of the bulls. And you know what? This chapter made me really glad that Black Clover is just a normal shonen and not a seinen manga, because had it been, things could have played out much, much worse. The bulls might have actually ended up dying in this chapter, with our final shot of them being the last scene of Nero screaming for Asta to come back. But lucky for her, this is not that kind of story, and her prayers were answered because as the chapter ends, Asta heroically walks out the door of destiny, ready to avenge his fallen friends. Which is good news for them because the only other two characters I thought might be able to handle Domnatio, the Witch Queen, and Dorothy were easily defeated in the chapter as well, though I credit that more to his new atmospheric magic attribute gifted to him by Lucius. It belonged previously to the Supreme Devil Ball before Lucius purified him. It's invisible and seemingly an area of effect type of magic that even after reading the chapter 3 times, the best way I can describe it is that it's simply broken as hell. But with it, he was able to take out the Witch Queen, Dorothy, Vanessa, and all the other witches in one single attack. And actually, now that I think about it, I don't think we saw Finral at all in the chapter. So I guess technically he might still be up. Actually, that might be the reason why the portal didn't close down when all the other characters got taken out, because maybe he's still active and keeping it up. But even if he is, there's really not much he can do to help out in this fight. Anyway, now that Asa's back, Damnatio's days are numbered, or I guess minutes. Yeah, I guess minutes would be the more accurate thing to say. Because even without Zen, Asa's regular Devil Union would be more than enough to counter all of Damnatio's abilities. And if the two were to get into a sword fight, Asa would definitely win, so his only real choice here of winning is to simply just run away. But Damnatio's pride would never let him do that, so we'll get to see him desperately try to beat Asta in the next chapter, only to one-sidedly be beaten down by our vengeful MC. And considering what he did to the bulls over the past 2 chapters, Asta is going to be out for blood. Sure, he won't kill Damnatio because he knows it's not his fault, he's being controlled by Lucius, but he's going to make sure that this fight hurts like hell, especially since he's probably been waiting to fight against his character since like chapter 218. Oh, and speaking of the bulls, everyone being on basically death's door in this chapter confirms 2 things are definitely going to happen in the next few chapters. One, none of these characters are going to die. And 2, at least Fujio and Ichika came with Asta back to the Clover Kingdom. And we know this because since none of these characters are going to end up dying, that means they're going to be healed. And the only two healers present that could save everyone with the amount of damage they've taken so far are Gray and the Witch Queen. And both of them are down for the count. Meaning we'll need a Mimosa level healer to quickly jump in and save the others. And the only one possible getting to them in time is Fujio, because all he has to do is walk through the same portal that Asta did. Now, hopefully, they're not the only two reasons that come through the portal. I know they can't all just leave their country unguarded, but I'd like to see a few more come over as well. But we'll have to wait until next time to see who came with Asta to help save the world from Lucius.